Hey guys, Jamie here from Crimson Education. Today I'm going to be talking to you about my experience applying for the Rhodes Scholarship, which I was fortunate to receive in 2017. Now the Rhodes process is notorious for its difficulty, its length of time, the application process, and the really emotionally, intensive journey that it takes to go through all the various phases. Firstly, I'm a New Zealander, so I went through the New Zealand Rhodes Scholarship process. And how that basically looked is that I initially created an application, which was a personal statement, as well as a CV that was 2 pages in length, outlined all the various kind of background material that I'd done in the last couple of years. As well as that, I had to get 6 references, which I found it was very intense because typically for even college you only use 2 or 3, and that included a reference from my childhood, basically someone from high school, as well as academic references, references from work, references from investors in Crimson, and it was very holistic overall. Now, on top of all of that, you have to really decide when you want to apply. So you can choose to apply in the middle of your last year of university, or you can apply years out. And actually the key thing is to make sure you submit your application before the age of around 24, although it does vary from country to country. I submitted my application a year after I finished college to the New Zealand process, and actually fortunately heard back that I'd been invited for an interview that was going to take place at a local university with some of the various faculty. So initially I got asked questions about my interests, why I chose to study in the US over the UK, my views on certain political issues that affected New Zealand. For example, some of the new legislation that affect universities, as well as some of the challenges we face as a country in New Zealand around mental health and other sort of areas that are really pervasive in Kiwi society. A combination of personal questions and sort of general knowledge, current event style questions. Now the Rhodes process is very well known for its focus on making sure people are globally minded. So there's a lot of context and research required to make sure you're up to speed on all of the different global events that are happening before going into the process. But for that initial interview, that wasn't as necessary. It was much more a kind of interview about me and New Zealand as a country. So after that step, I kind of, crossed my fingers and hoped to see an update. About 3 or 4 weeks later, I was notified that I got to the final round of the process. Important to note that in some jurisdictions around the world, there's actually another step in the middle. But for New Zealand, there's really 2 kind of key steps. In the final stage of the New Zealand Rhodes Scholarship process, basically you have essentially a 2-day process, which includes an initial kind of, a wine event, basically, where you go to often a hotel or some kind of function space, and you and the other candidates meet, as well as a lot of judges. And there's typically a judging panel for the final round of about 6 or 7 different judges who typically consist of some of the top academics from the country, as well as various business leaders, but often it's skewed towards academics. You have some interesting banter with the other candidates, get to know them, they get to know you, and it's also a good chance for you to get to know the judges in a pretty informal capacity. Now, the next day, you have the formal interview process. But between those 2 events, there's often a tradition with many of the Rhodes Scholarship communities around the world to have candidates go out for dinner the night after that first get-together. So the night after that first part of the process, we went to an awesome restaurant in Wellington, overlooking the harbour, and really got to know one another over a couple of hours. And the kind of logic behind this is, even though you might not all be successful, everyone's really interesting, they've got great stories and backgrounds, so it's really great to kind of get to know the other people going through the journey. On the second day of the process, we were invited to Government House, which is New Zealand's version of like the White House, something like that. So whenever diplomats come to New Zealand, they always come to this building, and it's where a lot of dignitaries do their various ceremonies. So it was very interesting, beautiful, amazing building, but my heart was racing the entire time. And I remember my interview being around the middle of the day, which was somewhat nerve-wracking because I had to basically wait for a number of hours in the morning, but it wasn't too bad compared to, say, waiting all the way to the afternoon. How the interview looked was I went into this pretty formal boardroom. I sat at the head of this table with about 4 judges on each side, and basically for almost 45 minutes, I got asked questions that are very far-reaching in nature. I got asked questions about the role of artificial intelligence in creating economic inequality. I got asked about questions around Crimson and the vision behind our organization and sort of our philosophy on learning. I got asked questions about certain cultural heritage components of New Zealand society, particularly around the Maori community and some of the festivities that have become really popular in recent years. We spent a lot of time on various academic interests that I had, as well as aspects of my own weaknesses, areas for improvement as a leader, and where some of the things that I was focused on taking advantage of if I'm successful in winning the Rhodes Scholarship. Now, once you finish that round, the real drama starts, whereby they make all the candidates wait for the final decision, and then basically we sat in a room and we were all given a piece of paper with a number on it, and that was the order in which we were going to walk into the following room and receive the decision. So one by one we were invited to go to the next room. We were sat down on a chair, literally sat down, because regardless of which way it goes, it's pretty emotional. It's a massive transformative scholarship worth a lot of money, but more so than that, an incredible experience. And so it's really high stakes people, and they're really emotionally connected. So everyone sort of goes to the next room one by one by one. Now, after they tell you what happens in the room, you're then sent to another room where you wait for all the other candidates to be sent in there. I went into this room and I don't think my heart ever was racing as much as this moment. It was much more scary for me than any kind of college admissions decision, any other kind of milestone I think in my life so far, because it really meant a lot to me. They told me that I was recipient of the scholarship, and it literally blew my mind. I sat down and I probably bubbled some random things out, and then they sent me to the next room. You sit in this room, and basically for about 10-15 minutes you wait for all the other candidates to come in. And it's crazy because basically some people in the room are deadly silent, and obviously they've just had some bad news or some good news, but no one knows kind of who won, who didn't win. And you sit there for a while until finally the Rhodes Scholarship conveners come in and they announce in front of you who the scholars were. So it's a very fast-paced turnaround. Everyone sees the resolution. It's very emotional, and I think they make it that way. But it was a really rewarding process. And in future videos, we're going to be doing a deep dive into how you can actually build your application and some of the areas you might want to consider if you're looking for a Rhodes Scholarship in the future or other types of academic scholarships post-undergraduate. So all in all, I hope that was useful as a deep dive into how the Rhodes Scholarship process works. If you want to learn more about top colleges or scholarships and how to get there post-college, make sure to like and subscribe. If you are interested in learning more about how you can be applying for some of these programs, reach out to us for an academic assessment. We offer all our YouTube subscribers a free consultation to help assess what kinds of opportunities could be relevant for you. I'm incredibly excited to pursue my studies at Oxford in this next year, and I welcome any of you guys to give it a crack if you see this as an interesting goal for you as well. All the best, and see you soon.